You know that sound. 3 sharp, heavy knocks on a wooden door that echo through a quiet house like gunshots. If you've ever served, or even if you've just lived long enough to know how the world works, you know that sound doesn't bring good news. It carries a weight, a frequency that bypasses your ears and hits you right in the stomach. My grandfather, William Brooks, knew that sound. He was sitting in his kitchen at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, staring into a mug of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago, enjoying the kind of silence you only earn after 78 years of life and 43 years in uniform. The house was still. The California sun was just starting to bake the dew off the lawn. And then, bang, bang, bang. He didn't jump. He didn't spill his coffee. He just set the mug down, stood up with that stiff, straight-backed posture that never really leaves a man once the Marine Corps drills it into his spine, and walked to the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. I was stationed 45 miles away at Camp Pendleton, and his poker buddies didn't come around until Tuesday. When he opened the door, he found 2 men standing on his porch. They were dressed in black uniforms that looked official from the street, but looked like cheap Halloween costumes from 2 feet away. Bad stitching, badges that were a little too shiny, utility belts that held more plastic than steel. The tall one was holding a clipboard like a weapon, puffing his chest out to compensate for something, and the short one was lurking behind him, tapping a finger against a body camera clipped to his chest. William Brooks. The tall one barked. He didn't ask, he demanded. It was the voice of a man who had practiced being authoritative in a mirror, but had never actually earned anyone's respect. Grandpa just looked at him. He didn't blink. That's me. We're from the HOA Enforcement Division, the guy said, flashing a laminated card too fast for anyone to read. You have outstanding homeowner association fees dating back to 2019. We're here to initiate the asset seizure protocol. Now, right there, most people would panic. Most elderly folks, hearing asset seizure and seeing uniforms, would start shaking, start apologizing, start looking for a checkbook just to make the scary men go away. But they didn't know who they were talking to. They didn't know that William Brooks had signed the dissolution papers for the Pine Ridge HOA himself 10 years ago. That HOA didn't exist. It was a ghost. Grandpa looked at the badge, then looked at the guy's face. The association disbanded in 2015, he said, his voice level, calm as a mill pond. I have the paperwork in my safe. So unless you're collecting fees for a ghost, you're on the wrong porch. The second man stepped forward then, aggressive, invading personal space. He pulled a manila folder out of a bag. Previous decisions have been overturned, sir. The Pine Ridge Restoration Project has resumed full operational authority under new federal guidelines. Federal guidelines. For a neighborhood watch. That was the tell. Grandpa's mind, sharp as a tack despite his age, flagged it instantly. HOAs are state entities. They don't operate under federal jurisdiction. Never have, never will. But he didn't call them out. He didn't slam the door. He did what any good recon soldier does when he's facing an unknown enemy force. He gathered intel. He noticed their eyes weren't looking at him. They were scanning the living room behind him. They were clocking the flat-screen TV, the antique silver on the sideboard, the folded flag from my great-grandfather's funeral on the mantel. They were casing the joint. This wasn't revenue collection. It was reconnaissance. I see, Grandpa said, stepping back just an inch, playing the confused old man. I must have missed the notice. What do you need? We need to verify property documentation, the tall one said, seizing on the weakness. Standard compliance procedure. Grandpa went to his desk and grabbed the deed. Not the original, just a copy he kept handy. He handed it over. The moment the paper touched the guy's hand, out came the smartphones. Click, click, click. They weren't reading it. They were photographing the signatures, the plot numbers, the legal descriptions. They were stealing his identity in real time, right in front of his face. The whole encounter took 12 minutes. Grandpa timed it on his Seiko. When they left, disappearing into a white van with Pine Ridge Restoration Project stenciled on the side in a font that tried too hard to look like a government agency, Grandpa locked the door. He went to the window and watched them go. He felt that old familiar tightness in his chest. Not fear, never fear, but the combat instinct. The feeling of being hunted. He called me that night, but he didn't tell me everything. He just said some confused fellas stopped by. He didn't want to worry me while I was on base. He thought he could handle it. He thought it was just a scam. He didn't realize it was a prelude to a war. 1 week later, they came back, and they brought muscle. Mrs. Helen Foster, the neighbor across the street who sees everything and forgets nothing, spotted them first. It was the same white van, but this time 3 men got out. The 2 from before, and a new guy. A giant. Built like a linebacker, neck thick as a tree stump. Walking with that rolling swagger of a man who's used to solving problems with his fists. Grandpa opened the door before they could knock. He wanted to control the ground. "Mr. Brooks," the tall leader said. He wasn't pretending to be polite anymore. "We've completed the legal review. The situation is critical. You have 2 options. Sign this temporary property management agreement, or we escalate to the enforcement division." Grandpa looked at the document they shoved at him. It was a masterpiece of nonsense. Fancy seals, bold fonts, words like mandatory asset transfer and Federal Compliance Code 77. It was designed to terrify someone who trusts paper more than people. Essentially, it was a document signing over temporary control of his home to their shell company. It was theft, plain and simple, dressed up in a suit and tie. "This is incomplete," Grandpa said, handing it back. "I'm not signing anything without my attorney." The linebacker stepped up. He rested his hand on a baton clipped to his belt, a real weapon, illegal for a civilian security guard to carry like that. "Sir, you're already in violation. We can do this the easy way, or we can call the extraction team." He pulled out a radio, or what looked like one, and spoke into it. "Dispatch, we have a non-compliant subject at Sector 4, requesting backup for potential hostile removal." It was theater. There was no static, no squelch, no reply. Just dead air. But to an old man living alone, it was supposed to be the checkmate. Mrs. Foster was watching from her window, and she didn't like what she saw. She didn't like the size of the new guy, and she didn't like the way they were crowding William. She picked up her phone and called me. I was in the armory at Camp Pendleton, stripping down a rifle, my hands covered in CLP oil. When my phone buzzed and I saw Mrs. Foster's number, I wiped my hands and answered on the first ring. "Ethan," she whispered, and the terror in her voice cut through the noise of the bass like a knife. "There are men at your grandfather's house. Men in uniforms. They're threatening him. They're talking about taking him away." I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask for details. I just said, "I'm coming." The drive usually takes 45 minutes. I made it in 32. I drove that truck like I was running from the devil himself. My knuckles were white on the wheel. My vision tunneled down to the road ahead. You have to understand, my grandfather is my world. He raised me. He taught me how to shave, how to shoot, how to be a man. The idea of someone threatening him, it woke up something dark inside me. When I pulled up, the van was gone. Grandpa was sitting at his kitchen table, staring out the window. He looked calm, but it was a brittle calm. The kind of calm a soldier has right before the mortar fire starts. "They're coming back, Ethan," he said quietly. "They took photos of the locks. They checked the sightlines. They aren't done. We spent that night fortifying the house. I checked every window, every door. I slept on the couch with one eye open. And around 2 a.m., I saw it. The white van, parked down the block, lights off, engine running. They were watching. They were waiting for the right moment. This wasn't just a scam anymore. It was an operation. And they had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were hunting a helpless old man. They didn't know the wolf was home. The next morning, Sunday, 7 a.m. The sun was barely up when I heard the car doors slam. Not 2, not 3, but 4 doors. A coordinated breach. I was in the back room, pulling on my boots. I moved to the window. The white van was back, along with a black sedan with tinted windows. 4 men were walking up the driveway. The leader, the linebacker, and 2 new guys. They weren't walking like salesmen. They were walking like a tactical team. They didn't knock this time. The leader stood on the porch and yelled, "William Brooks, by order of the Federal Property Restoration Commission, you are commanded to vacate these premises immediately." Grandpa opened the door. He was wearing his old army dress shirt, his medals pinned to the chest. He looked like a king standing before peasants. "Show me the warrant," he said. "Show me a judge's signature." "Stop resisting," the linebacker screamed. It was a cue. He and the leader lunged forward. They grabbed Grandpa by the arms. My grandfather is 78 years old. He's strong, but he's brittle. When they yanked him, his feet left the floor. They dragged him across the threshold, his shoes scraping against the wood. "Help! Someone help me!" Grandpa shouted. His voice cracked. It was the sound of a man who realizes that dignity won't save him. "They're kidnapping me." Mrs. Foster was on her porch, screaming into her phone to 911. But the cops were minutes away. These guys were seconds away from throwing him into that van and disappearing. They dragged him down the steps, across the driveway. "Get him in the vehicle. Move. Move." They were so focused on the old man. They were so focused on their prize. They were bunched up, shoulder to shoulder, wrestling him toward the sliding door. They had no perimeter, no rear guard, just tunnel vision. I stepped out the back door, silent as a ghost. I moved through the side gate. I didn't run. Running makes noise. I stalked. I came around the corner of the house and saw them. 3 men, backs to me, manhandling the man who taught me how to tie my shoes. I stepped onto the driveway. "Release him." My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the morning air like a razor blade. The 3 men froze. They turned their heads. They saw a man in his mid-20s, built like a tank, eyes dead flat, standing 10 feet away. The linebacker laughed. He actually laughed. "Kid, walk away. This is federal business." "You have 3 seconds," I said. "Or what?" The leader sneered. "You gonna call your mommy?" 1. The linebacker let go of Grandpa and turned fully toward me. He pulled the baton out. "I think the boy needs a lesson." 2. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I flipped it open, not to show money, but to show the green ID card inside. Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks, United States Marine Corps. You could see the color drain out of their faces. It was instant. The realization hit them like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with a concerned grandson. They were dealing with active duty infantry. 3. The linebacker lunged. He swung the baton, a wide, clumsy arc meant to intimidate. I didn't step back. I stepped in. The fight lasted exactly 3 seconds. I caught the linebacker's wrist mid-swing. I twisted his arm against the joint, pop, and drove my boot into the side of his knee. He went down screaming, the baton clattering across the asphalt. The leader tried to reach for something in his belt. I spun, driving an elbow into his solar plexus. The air left his body in a whoosh. As he doubled over, I stepped behind him and applied a rear naked choke. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The third guy, the one holding Grandpa, looked at his 2 friends writhing on the ground, then looked at me. He let go of Grandpa like he was made of lava. He put his hands up. "I'm just the driver," he yelled. "I'm just the driver." "Get on the ground," I said. "Face down. Hands behind your head. Now." He hit the dirt so fast he bounced. Grandpa stood there, straightening his shirt, breathing hard. He looked at the carnage on his driveway. 3 men neutralized, groaning, defeated. He looked at me. "They didn't know you were home, did they?" he asked, a small smile playing on his lips. "They know now," I said. I zip-tied them. All 3 of them. Standard issue flex cuffs I keep in my truck. I sat them in a row on the curb. The driver of the black sedan, the getaway car, took one look at the scene, threw his car in reverse, and peeled out, leaving tire marks all the way down the block. When the police arrived, real police, Officer Torres and his squad, they didn't see a crime scene. They saw a delivery. 3 suspects, restrained, evidence secured. Officer Torres looked at the men, then at me. "Staff Sergeant," he nodded. "Clean work." We searched the van. That's when things went from bad to worse for them. We found folders. Dozens of them. Profiles on 15 different houses in the county. Every single one of them owned by an elderly veteran living alone. Photos, financial records, medical histories. They weren't just scammers. They were hunters. They were targeting the most vulnerable heroes of this country. But the real smoking gun was the leader's phone. It was unlocked. I scrolled through the texts while Torres bagged the evidence. There were messages from a contact listed only as Senator's office. Target acquired. Video evidence required. Make sure it looks like he resisted. We need the footage for the hearing. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about stealing houses. This was political. A week later, Amanda Pierce showed up. She's an investigative journalist for the Register, the kind of reporter who keeps politicians awake at night. She had seen the body cam footage. "Oh yeah, I was wearing my GoPro, habit from the field, and she smelled blood." She sat at Grandpa's table, looking at the files we found. "Ethan," she said, "this company, Pine Ridge, it's a shell. It funnels money back to a PAC controlled by Senator Rebecca Caldwell." Grandpa went still. "Caldwell." He stood up and walked to his study. He came back with a dusty photo album. He flipped through the pages until he landed on a black and white photo from 1971. Vietnam. A platoon standing in front of a Huey. That's her, Grandpa said, pointing to a young lieutenant with cold eyes. Rebecca Caldwell. She served under me in Da Nang. She was military? Amanda asked. She was, Grandpa said, his voice hard. Until I court-martialed her. She was stealing humanitarian aid. Medical supplies meant for villages. She was selling them on the black market to pad her own pockets. I stripped her of her rank and kicked her out of my army. He looked up, his eyes burning. She swore she'd get back at me. She swore she'd make the military pay. It all clicked. The fake federal guidelines. The targeting of veterans. The humiliation. It wasn't just greed. It was revenge. She was using a criminal enterprise to destroy the lives of the people who reminded her of her own disgrace. The story exploded. Amanda's article hit the front page. Senator's Revenge, the secret war on veterans. My video of the takedown went viral. Millions of views in 24 hours. You couldn't go online without seeing the linebacker trying to swing that baton and getting dropped. Public pressure is a hell of a thing. Congress had no choice. They called a hearing. 2 weeks later, Grandpa and I walked into the Senate hearing room. I was in my dress blues. Grandpa was wearing his old uniform, tight around the shoulders, but immaculate. The room was packed. Cameras everywhere. And there she was. Senator Rebecca Caldwell. She looked older, harder, but the eyes were the same. She sat behind the dais, trying to look bored, trying to look untouchable. Amanda testified first, laying out the financial trail. Then I testified, playing the video, showing the brutality of her hired thugs. But the room went silent when Grandpa took the microphone. Senator Caldwell, he said. He didn't use her title. He spoke to her like a commanding officer addressing a subordinate. 43 years ago, I relieved you of duty for theft and dishonor. I thought I had removed a cancer from the service. Caldwell shifted in her seat. Mr. Brooks, please restrict your comments to. I am speaking. Grandpa's voice boomed, the command voice filling the chamber. You couldn't steal with a rifle, so you decided to steal with a pen. You targeted men who bled for this country. You tried to take their homes. You tried to take their dignity. And you did it because you hold a grudge against honor itself. Caldwell stood up, her face red. This is a political hit job. I have no knowledge of these thugs. Is that so? Grandpa pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. This is a transcript of a text message from your personal aide to the leader of the kidnapping team, sent 10 minutes before they arrived at my house. It says, make sure Brooks suffers. I want him broken. The room erupted. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights. Caldwell froze. She looked around, realizing the walls were closing in. She slumped back into her chair, a small, defeated woman. You lost your soul in Vietnam, Rebecca, Grandpa said softly into the mic, and now, you've lost your freedom. Federal marshals moved in before the hearing even adjourned. They arrested her right there on national television. Conspiracy, fraud, abuse of power. The list of charges was longer than her arm. We walked out of the Capitol building into the sunshine. Grandpa stopped on the steps and took a deep breath. He looked tired, but he looked light. Like a weight he'd been carrying for 40 years was finally gone. You did good, Staff Sergeant, he said to me. We did good, Captain, I replied. A few months later, there was a ceremony. The Veterans Association gave Grandpa the Distinguished Service Award. I got promoted to Gunnery Sergeant. But the best part wasn't the medals or the applause. It was the neighborhood. Mrs. Foster started a watch group. Every veteran in the county is on a list, not a target list, but a protection list. If a strange van pulls up to a vet's house now, 5 neighbors are out on their porches within a minute. We look out for our own. But the war isn't over. It never really is. Just last night, I was sitting on Grandpa's porch, watching the sunset, when my phone pinged. It was an encrypted email from an old buddy in intelligence. No subject line, just an attachment. I opened it. It was a file on a new HOA management company, springing up near Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Same tactics. Fake uniforms. Aggressive letters. And at the bottom of the email, a single line of text. They're regrouping. We need you down here. I looked at Grandpa. He was sipping his coffee, watching the birds. He saw me looking at my phone, saw the look in my eye. He knows that look. What is it? He asked. I stood up and put the phone in my pocket. Looks like we've got work to do, Grandpa. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, He looked like he was ready for a fight. "Well," he said, setting down his mug. "Don't keep him waiting. So, here's my question to you. We all know the system is broken. We all know there are predators out there who see our elderly veterans not as heroes, but as targets. But if 3 seconds of courage can bring down a senator, imagine what we could do if we all stood up. Have you ever seen fake authority trying to push someone around in your neighborhood? Did you step in, or did you look away? Let me know in the comments. Because the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And in the Brooks family, we don't do nothing. Stay safe, watch your six, and if you see a white van with a fake logo, call me. I'll be there in 3 seconds.